Top Secret Tuesday, Florida Maquis Patreon channel. If you are here, you are at the $10 a month subscription level. We do advanced studies here into psychological states, psychological conditioning, and how they can be used to affect certain operations. The most recent operation, of course, has been the one that has seen so much traffic on YouTube, talking about in a scenario where the government loses control, whether it's through EMP, loss of a power grid, some kind of a failure of the financial system, that the places out in the middle of nowhere are going to be very, very dangerous places to be. And the closer you can get to civilization or areas that have large wealth or large forces, security forces that is, are going to probably be your long-term best bet. Now, this has gotten a great deal of pushback because of this idea that in this scenario, the only person that you should ever count on is yourself and your neighbors. Well, this historically has been an incredibly bad idea, going all the way back to the pioneers. The farther out into the middle of nowhere you go, when there is crime, the criminals will always take the upper hand, simply because they're criminals and the people who are trying to survive are not. Highwaymen, the raiding parties from the Indians, out here for a long time, they called it the Wild Wild West for a reason. Because there were a lot of folks that thought erroneously the same thing. The farther away they got from Washington, the farther away they got from King George, the better off they would be. And it was a disaster, an absolute disaster in the thinking. And history proves this. Now, we're going to start here, normalcy bias. Normalcy is a subjective thing. It's an illusion. What is normal for the spider is chaos for the fly. Morticia Adams, absolutely a wonderful statement. It goes with the statement that in a massive prison break all across the country, due to the fact that the government will lose control of the prisons, it will be a state the prisoners will be in that they will see as positive, much more positive than what they were in. Their victims will see things in a much more negative sense, that they've lost all the creature comforts, they've lost internet, they've lost the ability to just go to Walmart and go to their job and all this kind of stuff. And so you'll have two groups of people that'll be seeing this exact same situation from a very different perspective, and that is the logic flaw of preppers. I've tried to explain this in many different ways, and I think it's a fault of my ability to explain two different perspectives simultaneously, talking about literally four groups of people. That you have the government being one group of people, the people that are in prison being group number 2, preppers being group number 3, and group number 4, of course, being those that are seeking safety in numbers. So follow me on the logic, okay? Most people, and cognitive dissonance has proved this time and time again, when introduced with information that disagrees with what they have assigned an emotional value to, like preppers have, this idea that, you know, being out in the middle of nowhere with lots of guns, groceries, they would rather attack the source of the information than even look at the old information logically, because it would mean that there's a source of shame with, like, oh God, why didn't I think of this? Or, you know, what will my friends think, because I know they don't all think this way. And they actually end up in a state of physical pain. And you can see that in the response on this video, that the attacks are visceral and angry and upset, and sometimes they go on, a lot of filthy names, and I've tried to delete as many as I could, but I couldn't get all of them. The engagement on it is really incredible, but it shows something. It really does. It shows that those who disagree with your statement, even though they see it as logical, will find a way to either discredit you or use some other specious argument to try to defeat you. This is one of my favorite 3-panel cartoons. If your numbers are correct, my strategic plan is irrational. Cognitive dissonance takes over. You are bad with numbers. What was that noise? So follow the logic with me, okay? And see if you come to a different conclusion explained this way. The government has lost control, whether it's EMP, whatever the reason. And the strategy of preppers is this: run out in the middle of nowhere and hide with your groceries and your guns. Now, when introduced with the idea that if the government has lost control and they're having to prioritize where they're putting security forces, more than likely, places like prisons that are barely hanging on right now as it is, we'll see breaches. And there will be these guys that will be completely free to do whatever they want to do. They could be a threat. Now, here's number one pushback. Number one pushback is, oh, the government's just going to kill them all. 2.3 million prisoners. There's going to be this mass plan that, even though the government has lost control, there's going to be this mass plan that's going to be put into effect with 100% cooperation of all the guards that would result in the death of all of these prisoners, creating this massive toxic nightmare in all of these prisons where there would just be, you know, millions of tons of rotting flesh from all these human beings. Preppers would rather believe something ridiculous like that than accept this as the truth. The next piece of cognitive dissonance that comes out is that most prisoners aren't violent, therefore they're not a threat. You need to worry about regular people, they will be. Well, wait a minute. If regular people will be a threat when they go 3 or 4 and 5 days without food, what makes these people, these guys that would come out, not a threat? Wouldn't they also be someone who's been predisposed to violence in the past anyway? And then there's this idea about guns, that the reason hungry, starving ex-cons in large groups wouldn't go after these people is because, of course, this is where the guns are. Because we, of course, don't see houses broken into every day and have guns stolen. Now, when things haven't fallen apart. And you see, you take all of these logic points, and it completely destroys the argument of hiding out in the middle of nowhere. As if prisoners are going to not act like you would. The same reason that you want to be out in the middle of nowhere will be the same exact reason they will want to be out in the middle of nowhere. Because that's where the resources are going to be. But there's not going to be any security for same said resources. Why? Because the resources have been prioritized. And that will be in the major cities and in the states with the largest populations of law enforcement and security. California, Texas, Florida, right around Washington, D.C., Virginia, Maryland, New Jersey, New York, have large security forces just because of what's there. Places like Iowa, Nebraska, South Dakota, Kansas, Missouri, these places have very, very limited resources as far as security goes. And in a situation like this, they're not going to be able to respond to 911 as if 911 would even be existing. But once again, we see how two things completely divorce themselves from each other. The idea that the government will be so ineffectual that you're going to need to be out in the middle of nowhere surviving on your own with your preps, but effective enough to go and kill 2.3 million prisoners in 50 states to protect the population has been the biggest pushback. And of course, that comes along with all the filthy names and everything else. So anyway, that's what I wanted to cover today. Cognitive dissonance meets the normality bias. That when logic fails and it causes that pain reaction, you will see that preppers have discovered something that they can't plan for. Their normality has been blown up with a base logic argument. and there's really no way to get around it. You can go through, and I did a video on this for just about every day for about a week, 7:11, actually before that, actually 7:4 through about 7:14 on my channel. And you can see all of the different arguments that are made and the visceral, nasty, horrible reaction that has come about of it. But strange thing we'll leave with right here. Now, as you can see, the thumbnail here is virtually the same as the thumbnail here. This one has 570,000 views, and this one has 7,000 views. It's a odd, very, very odd thing. This one, only 5,000 views. Almost an identical content, identical titling. Sometimes there's no rhyme and reason, but we will leave it there. Top Secret Tuesday. Thank you guys so much. Very much appreciate it. Like, share, subscribe.